Trey Wallace is still missing. And Penn State certainly threw a curveball. Watching the offense, I'm like, well, that doesn't look like him. This player seems to be a little bit shorter. Trey Wallace is over 6 feet tall, bigger build since he's a veteran wide receiver. I was like, that guy doesn't look like him. And then I saw another player wearing the number 6 running around, and I said, okay, now I'm a little confused. And then seeing both of them in the same line of eyesight, I said, one of them's got to be Trey Wallace, right? And then you just kind of ask around, you ask your peers, and you confirm that no, Wallace was not at practice. And then you realize, you just kind of look a little closely and you say, okay, yeah, that's what happened there. So Trey Wallace is not at practice again. Again, sustained an upper body injury. Don't know if it's a shoulder, collarbone. You can only speculate so much. He left the Indiana Hoosiers game after, going to the ground very tough, roughly, right? He landed on the ground pretty hard, went immediately to the locker room and came back wearing an arm sling. So since then, we haven't really seen him. James Franklin says that he's not out for the season, but once again, he is missing from practice for the brief viewing session that we can see as media members. The impact here is that Dante Cephas, the responsibility falls on him again. And I know that he stepped up against Maryland. Maryland's secondary has shown that they are not that good this season. And we know that it's not a lack of talent. Dante Cephas's problem hasn't been talent. That's why he came to Penn State and why he was all MAC when he was at Kent State. It's been the learning curve. And I feel like at this point in the season, that's not an excuse anymore. He came in late. He transferred in a little late, right? He came over the summer. It wasn't in Malik McLean's case, who came in the spring session, starting in January. Came in over the summer. You got to learn a playbook. You got to develop chemistry with your quarterback, your fellow wide receivers. You got to learn a much more complicated Mike Yurcich offense as opposed to what they ran with the Golden Flashes, and then to go along with the speed and the physicality of the Big Ten Conference and not the MAC. And I don't mean to be disrespectful to Maction. Zane, Maction season is upon us. Tuesday night Maction. Besides the point. Trey Wallace, I can't confirm or deny that he's going to be out inactive against Michigan, because I could see a scenario where it's, if he's good enough to play, maybe you have him for emergency purposes. But as we've seen, James Franklin is not pushing any of his players that are banged up and that are not 100%. Even if you're 95%, they are not playing you. But I wonder if it's an exception against Michigan. If Wallace is 80 to 90% healthy, could we see him against Michigan in some select spots?
Well, like rightfully so. I understand why Franklin does push his guys and get them hurt. Like that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think he's going to push Wallace because of what Dante Cephas has done last week and the week before. Because despite him not hitting like 100 yards, his routes have looked good. He's shown his athleticism that we've known. And obviously, Keandre Lambert Smith is still wide receiver 1. So you just need somebody to pick up a little bit of that load so Keandre's not like having to try and go catch like 200 yards. And the run game and stuff too, but having just like that insurance of like Dante Cephas to be another threat at wide receiver besides like just the tight ends or Lambert Smith. So I don't think they push Wallace. I think Wallace will stay on the sideline even if he is, like you said, like 80-20. And I think Penn State's just going to try and push it with what they have against Michigan, because to win and Wallace were to have played, they don't want him to be hurt and then like get more hurt before going like the college football playoffs. Like that's like the worst case scenario for them. So they'd rather sit him just for this game against Michigan, hope they can push through it and get him back as soon as possible. And also for next season as well. You don't want to make the injury worse.
Well, in a hypothetical world, you could have all of Keandre Lambert Smith, Trey Wallace, and Dante Cephas back next season, which would be good for Drew Aller in his second year of starting to go along with Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen. Like next year's offense could be really good, but we're concerned about Penn State and Michigan for this upcoming Saturday. Wallace not being 100% is a big deal, because I don't like the matchup between Will Johnson and Keandre Lambert Smith. I imagine that Michigan is going to use Will Johnson. It's strategically against KLS. KLS is your number 1 wide receiver at Penn State. Will Johnson's your number 1 cornerback for Michigan. Oh, look at that. It makes sense. But Will Johnson is a really good cornerback. And Keandre Lambert Smith has shown that he can be a number 1 against West Virginia, against the likes of Maryland. But what about Ohio State? And I know that he was the leading receiver against the Buckeyes, but it was a number one is supposed to be able to make those big plays when you need it most. He bailed him out against Indiana. Okay. But I hope that is not Keandre Lambert Smith's ceiling. But that's what it seems to be. So this is another big test for Keandre Lambert Smith and why I bring in Dante Cephas, because the pressure is on KLS to go up against Michigan's number one cornerback and try to be a difference maker. And Dante Cephas, the way that he was used against Maryland, I find a little bit interesting, Zane. Maryland's defense, like I said, is not good against the pass, but it was very Drew Aller trusted him in the red zone. I was surprised about that because Dante Cephas comes over from Kent State as a big play, like a true big play, like I'm talking 40 yards plus, deep down the field type of wide receiver. He has the speed to stretch the defense. So are we assuming that Penn State's keeping things under wraps and trying to conceal what they can do with Dante Cephas? Or is that how they're going to use him? I think in a game like Michigan, you got to try to get creative and use Cephas to stretch the field because he has the speed to do it.
And obviously, we know Cephas has the speed, but Franklin's talked before that he can put any of his receivers at anywhere, whether that's the X, the Y, or the Z. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we see Lambert Smith running the field or Cephas or even that third guy, whoever that may be, McLean or Clifford.
We'll see. Yeah.
But I think Penn State is going to, I think they'll figure it out. They'll put the right guy at the right spot. As Lambert Smith was talking today, they have a game plan for each opponent. And obviously, Penn State's going to be looking very closely at this Michigan defense and seeing how they can best penetrate against them. So I won't be surprised if they decide to stretch the field. As we've started to see more and more the last couple weeks, especially after that career-changing interception for Drew Aller, who's decided he's just going to sling the ball more.
I think it definitely took a little bit of pressure off of him, right? I hope it's career altering because it seemed like Drew Aller was limiting himself almost with his decision making. But I think that's a good point that the type of play that we're seeing from Drew Aller is very different. But it's easy to do that against Maryland. What we're finding out, especially when Maryland's got a good run defense, and Katron Allen had a good game. Nicholas Singleton did not. I don't know what's going on there. I think Penn State's got to find a way to scheme him a little better. But like you said, Drew Aller definitely looks like a changed quarterback from that interception. Right? He threw it downfield and hit Keandre Lambert Smith for a 70-plus yard touchdown, right? And then took some, even though they didn't connect, he was still a little more willing to throw the ball deep downfield to Keandre Lambert Smith. Trusted Dante Cephas in the red zone, threw it into triple coverage, right? Maryland had that play defended, and he threw an absolute rocket to Tyler Warren in the corner of the end zone, and I got the perfect view because that's where I was sitting for that spot. So to see Tyler Warren catch it, it's like, whoa, you blinked and you missed that throw. Somehow Warren ended up with the football, and I had my eyes shut for 0.5 seconds. But we know what Drew Aller can do, but we also know we understand the reality of it too. He is a at least right now, he's a conservative quarterback. 20 touchdowns and 1 interception, no fumbles. Drew Aller has only turned the ball over 1 time. It was against that Indiana team. And I just can't be led to believe that Drew Aller is going to completely change his game. Is he going to take a few? So instead of taking 1 risk a game, will he take 2 or 3? Yeah, but is he going to become this wild quarterback that's going to throw all of these 50-50 passes? Probably not. And it showed. He took a few more risks against Maryland. He didn't take like 10, 12, 15, 50-50 passes and just threw it up there, right? He still took the checkdowns. He still took the safe passes. He knew where his safety outlets were. He's still not throwing the risky passes at this point. And I don't think that's going to change against a Michigan defense who will make you pay if you make the wrong decision like that.
That's a very good point because Michigan's defense is arguably still one of the top defenses in the nation, just like Penn State's is.
They are the top. Analytically, Michigan's defense is, and Penn State is number 2 or 3, depending on what rankings you look at.
Yeah, so with that being said, they're obviously the best defense Penn State's going to go up against all year. So it's going to be a matter of conservative is Drew Aller, how conservative is Mike Yurcich in his play calling? Is he going to want to throw the ball deep or just do quick slants like they've tried to do all year?
Yeah.
Other like small opponents, and even then sometimes it didn't work. But I think this offense is going to change up its schemes a little bit just because they know Michigan's going to be harping for the ball. They play aggressive every play. So getting like a guy like Dante Cephas, who's now learning the plays and having his quick, twitchy athleticism is going to be big, because that'll take more coverage to put on him and less off Lambert Smith. So one of them is bound to be open at least a couple times throughout the night, like throughout the game on Saturday. And so I think Penn State knows what they're doing. Like you said before, not showing as much of what Cephas is capable of, because we've seen in practice and how fast he can get down the field. Get something that Penn State is definitely planning to use against Michigan.